Hey guys, nice to see you again. Welcome back. So, for a while now, I've been working on that Strawberry Shortcake Magical Girls video, and the art is just taking me way longer than I thought it was going to, so sorry. This has turned into one of my longer hiatuses, and it is very embarrassing. But working on a non-Winx video always gets me itching to get back into the rewrites, so I have decided to pivot. I do want to branch out and everything, but I was getting a little bit desperate to get a video out, and I really wanted to do this one, so here we are. If you guys enjoy my videos and want to support me in other ways, I have a link in the description where you can find my Big Cartel shop, info about commissions, and maybe, even just buy me a coffee if you're really feeling crazy. My, monster budget is crucial to this channel, but of course, I am also just glad to have you here hanging out with me. Oh my god, I said coffee. The website is Ko-fi. Anyways, here's the video. This one's just gonna be a little look at Bloom's long-lost royal family. I wanted to redesign Daphne again anyway and give her a glow-up like the Winx got, but she has a lot of looks to cover, so I figured I would just show her original form alongside her parents instead of in the solo video I plan on doing later. Plus, now you guys can see the family that Bloom would have grown up with if not for them all being dead. So yeah, this is just going to be her pre-death civilian form, and we already know quite a bit about it from her original video way back when. And like I said, I plan on doing another video for her with all her other forms, so sorry if this section is a little bit short. Daphne is one of my favorite characters in this whole show, in this whole story. Everything about her is so tragic, and it just continues to be as time goes on. Yet, she still does her best to find reasons to smile, and continues to be a caring soul to anyone she comes across. Daphne never knew hardship. She grew up in a castle, she had loving parents and a big comfy bed, and really anything she could ever want. She was also raised to be kind, generous, empathetic. After only ever knowing this beautiful life and always trying to be a good person, she was finally about to start stepping up into her role as a future leader of her kingdom, and then everything was just ripped away from her. As we saw with Sophia, she just wanted to be a big sister. And her final act in life, as she stood before the man that had just killed her parents with almost no combat training and a still weak grasp on her powers, was to stand her ground and make sure her baby sister would be safe. In her last moments alive, she just wanted to protect Bloom. She didn't know that her sacrifice would lead to her ascending to nymph status. She fully expected that in that moment her life was over. She expected to die. But she found comfort in knowing that because of her, Valtor would never get what he came there for. I think one of the main things that gets me about my original Daphne look is that the anatomy is just not great. But also, her dress is so boring. Yes, she's humble and all that, but she's still a princess. I think I was so intimidated by doing a big extravagant look for her nymph design that I really neglected her other outfits. But honestly, I think even her nymph form is in serious need of an update. She was sort of at the tail end of me trying to keep things animation friendly, so perhaps her overly simple dress was the dying gasp of that ideal. Despite not really vibing with her outfit, I do like what I ended up with for Daphne herself. I love how when she's alive, you can really see her resemblance to her sister. I love her with the strawberry blonde hair, but god, she is so pale in that first design. However, now that I've actually settled on a historical inspiration, it doesn't actually really make sense for a people like those of Domino to be so pale, as they live in a place that I am now basing off of the Mediterranean. So for this little redesign, I mostly focused on getting her in some nicer clothes and establishing the vibe of ancient Domino through the looks of her and her parents. If you watched the video I did for the people living in modern day Domino, you'll know that I got a lot of inspiration from the Sami people for their designs. However, back in Daphne's time, the dragon's flames were still providing magical climate control for the kingdom, making it a temperate oasis amidst the snowy mountains. So when deciding what the inspiration would be for their pre-fall fashion, I was looking for something that could easily read as a version of the modern modern outfits that would be comfortable in warm weather. And eventually I decided on Minoan Crete. I really like the way that it makes the outfits feel ancient, if you know what I mean. Like, the style is unfamiliar in a way that something like medieval England or feudal Japan or even Hellenistic Greece just doesn't hit. This might just be a me thing, but I feel like it's so much more common to see those in fantasy settings. Like, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any fantasy stories that are set in the Bronze Age. Well, there is the new Odysseus movie, but anyways, it was really hard to find references for Minoan clothing. So if any of you in the comments are like a career historian and think that these designs are just wildly inaccurate, I did my best, okay? Plus, all the women had their bare titties out, and I don't think YouTube would appreciate that very much. And Daphne is 17, so she absolutely had to be covered anyways. I tried to bring some youthful whimsy in by giving her this asymmetrical skirt and short sleeves. It's more playful than what we'll see on the Queen, basically. I also wanted to give Daphne a lot more jewelry, and I like to imagine she makes it all herself. Since Domino is a culture that places heavy emphasis on community and loved ones, and this is a family with incredibly strong bonds, I wanted them all to have an accessory that represents their family unit in some way. Daphne has a necklace with 3 beads, representing her and her parents, but after her baby sister was born, she made a new version that included a triangular pendant. Usually, a fairy's title wouldn't be known until much later into their lives, after they get their wings during, like, fairy puberty. But I think as the Fairy of Youth, Daphne would have been able to sort of instinctively know that her little sister was going to be the Fairy of the Dragon Flame, thus the triangle, which is what Domino often uses to represent the flame. Plus, it shows the way that Daphne viewed her little sister. That one single unique bead represents something important and beautiful. Despite no longer being blonde, Daphne still has the lightest hair of her family, which is meant to be one of the millions of ways I represent her never getting to grow up. I did make her less pale as well, and I think the low contrast between her skin and hair really works for her personality, especially when you see it next to how high contrast Bloom is. I made her clothes a lot more blue than they were before, really diverting away from that canon Daphne Alive color palette entirely. I do not like that palette. I gave her deep blue eyes as well. It's a color that represents calmness and trust, but also the deep sadness that she is destined for. For these redesigns, I wanted them to feel majestic and ancient, like something out of myth. You know how rose quartz was like designed to be the epitome of the dead wife trope, the dead mother trope? Like, she has that sort of ephemeral, dreamy quality to her where even in life it felt like she was almost destined to be a ghost. And I guess in ways she already was. That's something I want to capture for Bloom's blood family. In regards to her parents, she will never get the chance to meet them outside of memories and portraits. In this rewrite, they are dead. Not trapped in an alternate dimension or sword or anything, just dead. Daphne is, of course, as we know, a nymph at the bottom of Lake Roccaluce, and she's able to tell Bloom about their parents and show her brief visions sometimes, but they're not coming back. That was a big reason I did that whole video about the new people of Domino. It has moved on from the times of Queen Marion and King Oritel and Princess Daphne. Honestly, for this rewrite, I don't really even consider Bloom to be the Princess of Domino anymore. The new princess will be born to Bianca and Callum, and they are the rightful leaders at this point. Bringing it back to Marion, she is a brave, headstrong woman with a gentle heart. Her title is the Guardian Fairy of Sparks, the capital city of Domino and the location of the castle that she calls home. From the moment she was born, Marion was beloved by her people, and as she grew, so too did the depths of her love for them in return. Now, just because she was the princess didn't necessarily mean that she was going to end up with that title. Even her mothers had been different, and as we know, neither of her daughters share it. However, like Stella actually, Marion loved to go out and be amongst the people of her kingdom. She loved to go out and patronize their shops, celebrate their accomplishments, and support their passions. One of her favorite things to do was host exhibitions for the artists of her city. One of these artists just so happened to be her future husband, but I'll talk about that later. As a guardian fairy, Marion was also trained in combat. From a young age, she learned offense, defense, and search and rescue. If something were to happen to her people, Marion wanted to be there doing all that she could to help. She was a lot like Bloom in that way, always throwing herself on the front lines and fighting with everything she's got. She may also be where Bloom got her temper from, though, as alongside that strong sense of justice was a deep-seated need to make sure it was served. Even though Bloom never really got a chance to meet her birth parents, still being an infant when Domino was sieged, I like to think that they still live on in her in some ways. Daphne would surely tell her tales of them and point it out when she could see their personalities shining through. And of course, Daphne herself embodies parts of them as well. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a little like and maybe subscribe. I appreciate every one of you out there and love to hear your comments and feedback when I finally get these out. In the original show, Marion's outfit is one of those standout designs in my opinion. It's huge and wild and complicated, but I think also really balanced somehow. She has that huge updo and her big metal crown thingy, but with the fur drapey thing she wears and the flare of her skirt, it manages not to be too heavy on the top or the bottom. And the shoulder pads almost feel supportive or stabilizing for her big hair. I think her sleeves help too, and having these long narrow shapes and solid colors makes the whole thing not feel too busy. For my version of Marion, I am of course going to try to get that Minoan vibe, but I also want to bring in aspects of her original design just in little ways where I can. The updo and the curls actually translated quite well to this style, I think, and with her dress, I wanted to sort of get those shapes I was talking about. I went a little more open with her top than Daphne's, seeing how Marion is a grown woman, but still, no nipple for you. The way she represents her family in her outfit is with the 4 little beads on her belt. I like that it's something she can easily wear with the royal attire, but I can also see her incorporating it like into her sleep clothes or more casual looks. And I like that it's something that could easily be added to. Daphne came around when Marion and Oritel were quite young, so I think that now that she's almost of ruling age herself, her parents might be open to even another child after Bloom. But as we know, any plans of that nature would, of course, tragically never come to fruition anyway. Her color palette is largely the same as her original counterpart, with these light greens and pinks that just scream springtime to me. I like that even though she's the queen, she still gets to wear these fun, lively colors. Though I did give her closed-toed shoes with heels, as I do think she would try to get a bit more height, and maybe I was feeling a little lazy and didn't want to draw 10 more toes, okay? I'm really happy with how some parts of her outfit feel very structured, and some are more flowy and loose. Her hair came out very nice, I think. I wanted to emulate the headbands that I was seeing in a lot of my references, often with the hair brought over it. Her updo is still pretty big, but not quite as huge as it is in the show. I feel like maybe that's just a weak spot in my style. I always try to keep physics in mind with how things like hair and clothing behave, so more cartoony shapes don't really feature too often in my designs. Definitely something I do want to play with more though. I think Marion would put a lot of effort into her appearance every day, something Daphne would take after too. She has her signature hairstyle and makeup look that she wears every day. I really love the little sun decorations that Minoan women wore on their faces, so I tried to do a version of that with the triangle symbolism that I'm using to represent the dragon's flame instead of the sun in this case. She also wears orangey blush, something I think might be a staple in Dominion fashion, cause, you know, fire orange. And she wears eyeshadow to match her dress. I think it makes her feel a little more regal. Even in a place like Domino that is incredibly open and accepting and positive, there are still expectations of formality. Marion in the original series wears heavier makeup too though, and everyone in the family has their artsy side. Perhaps hair and makeup are hers. I did shrink her crown quite a bit, which I honestly have mixed feelings about, but I don't really understand how the original one was staying on her head. The middle piece comes up from the back, and the side pieces just sort of disappear into her bangs. I don't know, that's a pretty minor complaint. Like I said, I really like her design, but that crown just doesn't really fit with the vibe I'm going for here. And I guess I wanted it to read more easily as a crown because she herself is the one of royal blood, not her husband. Technically, Oritel would be the prince consort of Domino, as he was not born into the royal line, but out of respect and simplicity, I do think he would still just be referred to as a king. This is fiction, and it doesn't need to be a one-to-one of real life. And royal hierarchies confuse me. As I mentioned before, Oritel met Marion at a royal ball. However, he wasn't actually attending as another guest. Rather, he was part of the entertainment that night. Hold on to your hats here now, because Oritel's performance was not singing nor dancing, but rather a magical light show stretching across the sky above the castle grounds. He created beautiful, glowing figures, beams of intense, dazzling colors and explosions of crackling energy. And he did this with fairy magic. I know you all have had questions about male fairies from basically the moment I started this rewrite, and we've talked about gender and its relation to magic a few times, like with Roxy being a trans fairy and the fact that there are male witches. And I have always been clear that at the time of our story, there were no male fairies. But I did try to make it clear as well that I had plans regarding the concept. And here, now, I can let you in a little bit on those plans. The history of this world, pre-Valtor, has been twisted and rewritten by the Company of Light. Not to say they are a malevolent force, rather a morally gray one, despite their efforts to do what they may think is best for the people of Magix. Though the ancestral witches and their monstrous progeny were eventually defeated, it was not without great tragedy befalling the world. And the true severity of this tragedy was so great that it would change the very nature of magic on the planet forever. In an effort to maintain some level of peace of mind for those who remained after the war, great lengths were taken to alter the collective memory of the world, and thus change history so that the grief and anguish caused may be lessened. An entire gender, practically half of the world, lost their chance at getting wings. Now, their only option for magic was witchcraft, and that had been stained with the blood of countless souls. For so long after Valtor, it continued to be demonized and feared. Thus, the efforts of men to distance themselves from the label of witch. Even if in modern day, they don't even know why they feel so compelled to do this. Bloom is the last living person to be fathered by a male fairy. There are those like Helia who have two mothers, thus the possibility of having been born to two fairies, but never again would a child's father bear fairy wings, and now no one would even know that any ever had. Back to Oritel, he was the embodiment fairy of chroma. His magic dealt with color and light, and his creative spirit would utilize those powers to create beautiful yet fleeting works of art. In a sad way, his medium would reflect his life as well. His romance with the Princess of Domino was a whirlwind. It seemed they clicked instantly, and as they spent more time together, their love only deepened. Soon they were to be married, and soon after that came Daphne. Oritel's joy and devotion to being a girl dad would be rivaled only by that of Mike Peters. Yes, King Oritel was certainly more of a lover than a fighter. However, after becoming both a member of the royal family and a father, he felt it was imperative that he learn how to hold his own on the battlefield, and his wife would gift him a sword that he would later use in an effort to defend their very doorstep. By the time Valtor's forces arrived in Domino, male fairy magic had already disappeared. For this video, I'm drawing them all at the time of their deaths, but let me know if you'd like to see their fairy forms too. They aren't like super important to the story, but there are some aspects that, I don't know, depending on how seriously you take this rewrite, it could be spoilers. Either way, you will see male fairies eventually. Don't worry. Anyways, if you thought the women's clothing from Minoan Crete was skimpy, get a load of this guy. Pretty much every reference image I could find for what men were wearing had them in little more than a loincloth. And you know what? I think that's perfect for what we're working with here. I mean, I did give Oritel more than that since he's the king and needs at least a little bit of armor to align a bit more with the original counterpart, but I absolutely needed him to show thigh, okay? He just had to. I actually couldn't find many examples of Minoan armor, but it seems to have been just as revealing as their everyday clothing. From what I've been reading, it seems as though, for quite a while, it was believed that Minoans were a civilization of nature-loving, peaceful people, more focused on trade. The majority of evidence for this seems to be that little of their art depicted war or violence, and that there weren't many walls found around their cities. They are often compared to the Mycenaeans, another Bronze Age civilization on the shores of the Aegean Sea that came a few thousand years later and were much more obvious in their militarism. Both, of course, had naval forces, being island nations, but it seems the Mycenaeans were much more aggressive and focused on conquest. Though the juxtaposition of mean war society and nice nature society doesn't hold up to scrutiny, I did think that perception was an interesting analogy for the dynamic between Domino and Heraklion in my rewrite. Domino, being the more ancient kingdom, focused on art and humanities, and Heraklion being their neighbor with expanding their empire a little too high on their list of priorities. Heraklion society certainly valued their military far more than Domino, but that does not mean that Domino was entirely defenseless. They just didn't make it their entire personality. And besides, they were surrounded by mountains and tundra. Not to mention, their only coastline was an ocean full of glaciers. I'm sure they were like, we're good. Anyways, all this to say that King Oritel's main historical aspects are his little skirt and the design of his helmet. I tried to supplement his outfit by using references from other armor in the same general area and time period. I really like the idea of the feathery top of his helmet being symbolic of the fire, as I was honestly trying to include that theming wherever I could. Also, I don't want this version of Oritel to be as proper and well put together as the show version. He is where Bloom gets her messier, artistic side from, with Daphne taking more after her mother, like I said. Can I just take a second to talk about his design in the show, actually? I mean, I like that he mixes metals. I think that's a really interesting choice and shows the duality of his outfit being both kingly attire and armor. But overall, I can't say I really like his design. I think the crown with the strange metal cowl is pretty weird looking. I would say perhaps it's supposed to be like a fine chainmail or something if it didn't turn to a big cone at the top of his head. And the red jewels on the side make it look like some kind of creature to me, like some kind of skinned creature. But the main issue I have, I think, is the proportions. Why are his feet so big? At first glance, it's fine, but the longer I look at him, the more I realize that his head looks so tiny. The whole thing just feels sort of half-baked, I guess. Especially next to Marion, whose design I think is really strong. I tried so hard on him, okay? I wanted him to have his beard more scruffy and some of his hair peeking out from underneath the helmet. He's not as clean cut as in the original. He's still a strong, regal king, but he's also, a silly, goofy kind of guy. I really wanted to feel like he would be great friends with Mike, and I'm sure Bloom wishes deeply that they could have met. Part of me is kind of sad to not be bringing back Bloom's birth parents in this rewrite, but honestly, I think it's really important for the tragedy that is the kingdom of Domino. Daphne being able to carry on as a nymph is an incredible miracle born out of a deep love and sacrifice, but also just luck and really good timing on Valtor's part. It's not that their parents didn't love them, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people die and it's not fair and it's not right. But the perpetrator has no moral objections to those things. What they do have is the means to wipe out an unfathomable amount of people. The air nomads didn't come back just because Aang loved them. Just imagine how much that would undercut the severity of an entire people being wiped out. I'm not going to be doing that with Domino, especially not now. And on that note, I leave you these ghosts. I truly hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider checking out the rest of this rewrite on my channel. We have a wonderful little community here, and we're really getting into the thick of it now. Alright, bye. I feel like I should promise the next video won't be so heavy. I'm gonna shoot for Mike and Vanessa next, but after that, no promises.